I don't know if I like DeMar DeRozan on the Kings because when I think about that move, it just comes with so many questions. Like the Kings in this light the beam era have been based on, the two-man game of De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis surrounded by spacing, and that's what's made them so dynamic offensively. And then you throw in this, I'll give DeMar DeRozan credit. He's a great on-ball guy, puts up great numbers. I don't think anyone's ever doubted his ability to do that. And so it's definitely a talent upgrade for Sacramento, but when you think about what their offense is predicated on, where does this guy fit? Where does this guy who sort of needs the ball in his hands, he can't space the floor, he hasn't been able to develop that three-point shot ever. It's not going to happen now, and considering the fact that he's going to be 35 years old to start next season, I can't imagine he's too interested in, playing off Sabonis in terms of cutting and off-ball movement, and so it doesn't make sense in that way, and obviously it's a talent upgrade going from Harrison Barnes to DeMar DeRozan, but in defense of Harrison Barnes shot 38% from three last year, and he's way more built to defend power forwards. So when you think about, again, it's a talent upgrade, but is it the right fit? And that's where I have those questions because, Harrison Barnes is not as good of a player as DeRozan, but I think fits more into what Sacramento's scheme is. And then you also have to consider Keegan Murray going into year three. You'd like to see him maybe get more on-ball opportunities, develop more reps, grow as a player. And now you add DeMar DeRozan, who's going to be taking close to 20 shots a game. Now those development opportunities for Keegan Murray go out the window, and that might feel sort of stagnant. And I imagine that's sort of frustrating both for him and just people who are a fan of him and his potential development and what he could potentially become as a player. But on the flip side to it, I do think there's an argument for why Sacramento did it. First off, it was a fairly low investment to bring in DeMar DeRozan, 3 years, $76 million. The last year's guaranteed. They didn't have to necessarily give up so much in the sign and trade. Barnes obviously is a nice piece, but he's not he's not part of their core. He's always been expendable. Chris Duarte, who wasn't really part of the rotation, 2 seconds, and admittedly the unprotected pick swap in 2031 with San Antonio. That might come back to bite them in the butt, but that's 7 years away. And I will say in Sacramento's defense why they did this and why I think they did this is because they missed the playoffs this past year after making it 2 years ago, and the West just keeps getting better. You look what OKC did and other teams like that, and just there's so many lower teams. The Spurs are going to be better. So many teams are going to be better. So many teams, Dallas, there's so many teams out West that are going to be better. Minnesota, all these teams are going to be better. And you're Sacramento, you might feel like you start slipping down the standings. You might be falling behind in the race in the Western Conference. And it's not to say that I think DeRozan is the piece that's going to help them keep pace and it's going to have them be a top 4 seed again and it's going to help them compete, for the Western Conference Championship. But I do think there's something to be said for, not sitting around, they have to do something, right? You have to do something to keep pace in the West, to not feel like you're drowning, to not feel like you're falling behind. And in an ideal world, they'd have the perfect, piece lineup to go out and either sign in free agency or acquire, in a trade, but that piece wasn't there. And if that piece isn't there, then you can make the argument that okay, we just got to do something, right? We got to do something. Something is better than nothing. When the West just keeps getting better and better, we need to do something. And so, I guess they could have traded for Brandon Ingram, they could have traded for Larry Markkinen, but that might have cost them so much more. So what I imagine is that they viewed, pros and cons, cost, benefit analysis, all that stuff, and figured DeRozan, with all his faults and with all the questionable fit that he might have in Sacramento, is still a really talented player. And when you can bring in a caliber player like DeMar DeRozan, who, again, even though he's going to be 35, is still really talented, still really good. I think their crunch time offense is going to be great, having DeMar DeRozan and De'Aaron Fox. I think it's going to be great. So when you consider, they just needed to make a move, and so DeRozan, through all his faults, is still a really talented player, and considering that Sacramento, relatively speaking, as much as I love Harrison Barnes' fit on this team, relatively speaking, they did not have to give up so much to get a player the caliber of DeMar DeRozan. When you consider that they just haven't really had so many moves to make, internally, I don't know outside of Keegan Murray where they can improve necessarily. It's just, you could argue that just, hey, it's not the perfect fit, but it's a risk worth taking to try and keep pace in the West. And so that's why they did it. And I might not necessarily agree with it, but I will always respect moves teams make to try and, not remain complacent, to really just try and go for it, to keep trying to get better, even if it might not be the perfect hand in glove fit. And that's what Sacramento did here. And I'm excited to see it either way.